don't like to include such a long definition, but is necessary because racism is complicated, first and foremost. We need to understand that the racism that we have within this country was created for a very particular reason, and that was to keep people of color, indigenous, Black people, on a hierarchy of inferiority to white people. Okay? So when we're talking about racism, it denotes power, meaning you have to have the power to be able to act on your prejudice and discriminatory views. You also have to have that sense of superiority, right? So I am better than you. You are inferior to me. So a lot of times what we're talking about in society is prejudice and discrimination, which can be racism, but can't be. And I know it's complicated. But for instance, discrimination would also include gender discrimination. It would also include people who are disabled, able-bodied discrimination. So discrimination and racism is not the same thing, okay? Racism is always discrimination. Discrimination is not always racism. So when you have someone who is Black saying something like calling out somebody's skin color or saying things like, I hate all white people, we have to pause on calling that straight up racism, because you have to look at the underlying causes as to, okay, why are people saying what they're saying? A lot of times people of color, and in particular Black people, they are responding to racism, or they have internalized the racism that they have had to endure, and their responses, though it may seem racist, is really a response to that racism that they have endured. And I know it's complicated, and I know I probably didn't answer your question, Jalen, but I personally would say, well, I would say that based on this definition, no. I would say they can be discriminatory, and I would say they can be prejudiced, and I would argue that those two things are bad, and we should not be doing those things. But for instance, a lot of people call the Nation of Islam racist, right? I don't agree with a lot of the things that they agree with and a lot of things that they teach. But is it racism if they're responding to racism? So a lot of people like to take things, like a lot of people like to take discrimination and prejudice in a box and say, well, this is racism, it's reverse racism, blah, blah, blah. That's not a thing. Now, with that said, nobody should be referring to anybody by their skin color for any reason whatsoever. Why do you need to do that? Is the question that I'm always asking people. Like, what is the purpose of just randomly saying something like that? I would say people probably came at you, Jalen, because people are probably just thinking about the history and the legacy of racism and the terrorist acts that have come about as a result of that racism. And they are saying, well, no, saying someone is white is not racism, and you shouldn't have said that. But the nuance here is that it is discriminatory, and they shouldn't have said that. It is prejudice. They shouldn't have said that. There's no need to say that. But I also don't know the context of the conversation, the entire conversation. So I can't give a more in-depth view. There were a few questions. I want to go back and make sure that I answered them. Okay. Does anybody, I don't know if that helped clear things up. I know it's complicated, but did that help? Jalen?
Yes, it helped a lot, but the context of the situation was really not that deep at all. It was a it was a post on Instagram about Barack Obama and the things he did good as a president, and somebody commented and said Barack Obama was a horrible president, and I'm glad we have Trump for 2020, and then somebody replied to their comment saying you're so dumb. And then the person that said Trump for 2020 responded and said, and you're black. And then that person responded talking about what does my skin color have to do with it? And that's when I got involved. That's why I felt like that was a problem. Why would you have to? Why would somebody that with the whole context of the situation? What does his skin color have to do with anything?
Oh, so
That's what I feel was racist.
supporter said, and you're black.
Can you repeat yourself, please?
The Trump supporter said, and you're black.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. He said you're so dumb for because she said that Barack Obama was an idiot, and now we're glad that we have Trump in office, Trump for 2020. And he responded, "You're an idiot." She responded, "And you're black." That's why I have a problem.
So, I mean, obviously, I mean, yeah. So now with the context, that's definitely racist. But
They kept saying that it wasn't racist because they just called him by his skin color, which is not racist apparently because that's on his birth certificate.
right, whether it's racist or not, like even if it's the reverse and a black person is saying, like, well, you're white to somebody just randomly like that, that's discriminatory. That's you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that.
Period.
Yeah. I don't get what I don't. Yeah, you just should not do that. But also, it's the internet, and people are weird. So people are weird, and people are racist. And oh, my thumb is weird. People use the internet to say things to people on the internet that they can never say in real life. So also just remember that. And I feel like just like say what you need to say, and then just leave it be because it's the internet, and people just say weird things and racist things, and they do things to get a reaction. And then also, like I remember they were saying that there were like trolls like from Russia that were like trying to stir up race tensions here in the U.S. And they did it right before the election, so they were like commenting and making like accounts as if they were like black people and as if they were white supremacists too, and just like trying to stir up drama. So also remember that. And just like try not to engage because you don't know if you're actually talking to a person or a troll or a robot or whatever. So it's like, let people be weird on the internet. And also know that because you have African American history and we talk about these things, not everybody has that. This is only something that we have here in Philly. Most of the suburban areas don't have this. So people just don't know, and they're also ignorant. And so here we are. But I hope that explains this concept of racism. Tell me yes in the comments or unmute yourself. Does this make sense to you? It's the power, it's the prejudice, it's the superiority, right? And superiority is like, I am better than you. You are beneath me. So all these things, in my opinion, have to be present for racism to exist. And so this is also, in my opinion, why there is no such thing as reverse racism. But there is prejudice and there is discrimination, and anybody can be prejudiced and anybody can be discriminatory, and nobody should be any of these things at all. So that's just that on that. And so we are going to move on to the breathing portion because it's 11:25 already, and we can extend the rest of this no more. So, yeah. So, Ranita, I have to call you back. I'm in the middle of class. All right. I don't need to hear anything else. We are going to present, and we're going to breathe. We need to breathe after that.
Yeah.
All right. Can everybody see the screen? All 16 of you? went too far. Right. So we are going to start by taking a deep breath in. We're going to breathe in all the good things that we have in our lives. And exhale all the stress and the anxiety and the anger that we might have. Breathe in good. And exhale. Breathe in. And exhale. Breathe in. And exhale. Breathe in. And exhale. One more time. And exhale. Great. Got a little bit dizzy. It's a lot of breathing. All right. So, can anyone tell me of the last month, because we've been at this for a whole month, what is the most interesting thing you've learned thus far? You guys can unmute yourselves, but just put a hand emoji in to show that you want to speak, or just type hands into the chat box, or you can just write it in the chat box. So you don't necessarily have to verbally say it. Oh Lord, who's selling snacks in the comments? I can't these kids. All right. So anybody want to share? What is the most interesting thing? Oh, I didn't set my timer. Let me do that. Anybody? Anybody? Otherwise, I'm going to do this horrible dancing.
Dance.
People are always going to hate what they don't understand. You got that right. And somebody can be prejudiced and harsh and still not be racist. Yeah, I mean, being prejudiced is wrong and not acceptable. But racism is something really specific. So I feel like as a society, we have to be very intentional about what it is we're saying is racist. You can say, I don't like your shoes, right? You can say, I don't like you because you're a girl. You know, that's not necessarily racism. The most interesting thing I learned is that the accused African-American would be a very young black boy, falsely accused. Yes, absolutely. And there's always been a tendency to view black boys as threatening and violent and much older than they actually are. And if you're taller, it makes it even worse. There are instances where you have, you know, a child that's like maybe 13 or 14, and they might be 6 feet tall. And people look at that child, and, you know, you can look and tell that someone is young. They have a baby face, right? But people look at them, they see the height and they see their skin color, and they automatically assume older, and they automatically assume dangerous. And that is part of the implicit and explicit bias that people carry around with them. Implicit meaning on the inside, you don't really know sometimes that you are having these biases. And then explicit would be, you know exactly what you're saying and exactly what you're doing. So there's also different forms of racism, right? sometimes people are racist without even realizing it. And I know you guys might be like, well, how do you not realize you're being racist? Because you could have just grown up around it your whole life and thought it was perfectly acceptable. And it wasn't until somebody pointed it out to you that you realized not only is this not acceptable, but this is racist, or this is discriminatory, or this is being prejudiced. So, yeah. Oh, Cameron said he's 5'10". Cameron, have you? Oh, he said that's me every day. I was just about to ask that. Yeah, and Jalen's 6'3". So,
wow.
Yeah. And I would say, honestly, it's really important to understand that this is my also just really understand that it's important to understand that this is my definition of racism. And yes, there are some people that agree with me. There are other people that say, no, you just need a very narrow definition of racism.
No, that definition is it's widely accepted. It's a part of critical race theory.
It is.
They say racism is power plus prejudice. So you put more in it with discrimination and others, but it's the same idea. You know, you can't be racist without power. You can have different types of power, though. You know, you can oppress people in different ways. So you can have social power and not institutional or systemic power through politics. You're not in a place to make policy, but you can have social power, which means you're being mean to someone, and so other people are going to be mean to that person.
Yeah.
So it's like different levels, you know, and some are just way more harmful than others. And then even, you know, Black people can be racist as well towards other Black people or towards other races, even if they're in a position of power or influence. So, yes, it's just the power to oppress.
Oppress, yes.
On race.
I would say, yeah. I would say it would, I don't know. So, and again, everyone has their, you know, so Ms. Williams thinks that or believes that Black people can be racist towards other Black people and towards other people.
If they're in a power to make policy and they're making anti-Black policy.
Yeah. But is that necessarily, well, that would be considered internalized, right? That would be like,
well, it starts with internalized, but then once they're making that policy is impacting a Black population of people in a way that is not impacting white people or other races, rather.
Yeah.
Then they are being racist. They're doing the same thing as other people have done. Yeah.
They're taking on racist policies. But I also, so I'm thinking, because, you know, in South Africa, right, after, you know, there's been a couple of news stories because they started taking land away from the white farmers and basically giving it back to the African people. And so we're saying, well, that's discriminatory and that's racist because now you're punishing these white people, using your position of power to punish people for the land that was passed down to them or the land that they earned or whatever. So
that's affirmative action.
Yeah, but even with that, but you see what I'm saying?
I do, but it's not the same, right? Because when you've had historically discriminated against a group of people and now you are correcting that, that's not racism. That's affirmative action to correct something.
There you go. But a lot of people, right, there will be a whole section of people that would say, that's racist. Actually, there were a lot of people when the story came out that was like, that's racist. So that's also why it's just important to understand like nuance and history and historical perspective, because also a lot of people don't know what happened in South Africa, even though people should know. They don't. So we just gave y'all a whole history lesson. Have
a good day.
Bye. Put the book bags down. So Samuel said the most important things I learned was that the KKK founder was he wasn't a founder, he was a leader. But he was a general Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, yep. Also known at the election of 1850. This is one of the things that led to the Civil War. Good. So you guys are learning things. Awesome sauce. All right. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the last reported lynching. It's not the last reported lynching, but one of the last reported lynchings that has occurred here. So it's like self-defense. You can only inflict a crime if you started. If it's self-defense, I'm probably no, Jalen. These kids reaching with those long arms. Cut it out. All right. So one of the last reported lynchings is that of Michael Donald. This occurred March 21st, 1981. And just to give you guys some context, I'm 35. I'm telling my age. Yes, it's okay. I'm 35 and I was born in 85. So 4 years before I was born, this Black man was lynched. So what happens is after a hung trial for the murder of a police officer, so essentially what happens is a Black man was accused of murdering a police officer. He went to trial. There were Black people on the jury. I mean, duh, right? It's supposed to be a jury of your peers, so it should have Black people, white people, Asian people, right? Women, men. But it was a mixed race jury, and the jury ends up being hung. One of I think he was like the second in command of the UKA, which is United Klans of America. He comes out and makes a statement, and it's basically like, if they can get away with killing our people, then we should be allowed to get away with killing theirs. So he makes this statement, and his son and two other white men, two other white supremacists, decided to take him up on that. And they basically found Michael Donald one night. They got drunk, they got a gun, they got in a car, they started driving around, and they just targeted this man. He was literally walking home. He had actually went to the store to buy his sister some cigarettes. And on the way home, they spotted him, unfortunately. So they lured him to the car by asking for directions. And when they lured him to the car, they pulled out the gun. They made him get into the car. And when they got him into the car, they drove to a wooded area. They started to beat him. He tried to run away. They captured him. They ended up slicing him in his throat 3 times to ensure that he was dead, and then they hung him from a tree. Yep, he was 19. When you talk about lynching, I taught about the place that was carrying on lynching in my country during the 80s, and for that place. Oh wow. Yeah, and that's also why I said lynching doesn't necessarily have to be racially motivated. But in the US, it's become synonymous with that. So this is a picture of him. That's how they found him. His mom ended up suing the UKA, the United Klans, and she actually won. She actually bankrupted that particular KKK group. She bankrupted them, and she won a lot of money. And so that also was kind of like the linchpin. That's a good one. So that was also kind of like the thing that helps to break up the KKK once again. But obviously, it's still around. So there's that. This next one is a lynching by car of James Byrd. And I'm going to put everything up. So what happens once again, he is a Black man. He's alone. He accepts a ride from 3 men. Those 3 men are Sean Berry and John King, who were 23 at the time. And then you had Lawrence Brewer, who was 31. So they lured him into the car. They drove to a deserted road, and they wrapped the chain around his ankles. and dragged him for more than 2 miles behind the pickup truck. And he was alive the entire time. And he died when they hit a rivet in the road, and the rivet caused him to become decapitated, and it also tore off one of his arms. This was in 1998. So somebody do the math for me. This was like when I was in middle school. I was in middle school. So these things are not in the past. They're very real.
And that case just wrapped up.
Yes. Yes. One of the men, I think it was it Barry or King, was just executed just last year.
Yeah.
He was executed just last year. And I'm talking about no remorse whatsoever. On both of the cases that I just mentioned. Many of these, a lot of them that had no remorse whatsoever. Some of them were in jail and they got more white supremacist tattoos. It's really hard. It's hard to talk about these things. I think about my father, who was born in Mobile, Alabama, and these things are very real and it's very, very traumatic. And so when people say, people need to get over it, we need to move forward, it's like, how can you move forward when this was in my lifetime? This is in my father's lifetime. This is in Ms. Williams' lifetime. You can't move forward when that wound is still very much open and still very hurtful. So this picture, it left miles of like when they found out what happened. And the men actually went around bragging about it. So that's also how they knew who did it. But when they found out what happened, they went to investigate and they found like body parts strewn along the road at different intervals. And this particular area is where they found his head. And they wanted to mark it, for the purposes of the investigation. So this is what this picture represents. Yeah. So for the first time, I wish somebody would try to tell me let the past go. I know. So for the first time, and I couldn't even believe this when this first opened, but for the first time, there is a museum, a memorial that is dedicated to lynching. And so this video takes us inside that memorial and gives us some background on it. So I'm going to play it for you guys. And hopefully one day you'll be able to get there.
I told my mom I was coming to Montgomery, Alabama, and I was going to go to what I told her was a lynching museum. And she said, why would they want to do that?
Yeah, I think that we have developed a really advanced coping strategy of silence.
This is the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, a site dedicated to the more than 4,000 victims of lynching in America.
4,000.
We started the research years ago, and then the monuments started to come. And when they arrived, I think the thing that completely blew me away that I hadn't just thought about before was sort of seeing movement.
He is Brian Stevenson, a lawyer who founded the Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, an organization with a long and powerful record of getting more than 100 people off of death row, of fighting for juveniles with life sentences, and of winning cases that went as high as the Supreme Court.
Even in the names, you see stories like this is an entire family that's killed in Tatnall County, Georgia. And those stories are everywhere. Elizabeth Lawrence lynched in Birmingham, 1933. School teacher coming home. She was walking and a bunch of white kids started throwing stones at her. And like any good teacher, she said to these kids, don't throw stones at people. They went home and told their parents that they had been chastised by a black woman. The parents were outraged. They organized a mob. They went to her home and they lynched her.
The memorial and a nearby museum that connects slavery, lynching, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration open on April 26th. And some people might find it difficult to make the connection between slavery and mass incarceration. Might be a difficult leap for some people.
Well, and I don't think people should leap. I think it's a continuum, right? This picture gives insight on why we're talking about this. Southern prisons made incarcerated people pick cotton into the 80s and early 1990s.
Into the
and
80s.
That's where that language in the 13th Amendment that prohibits slavery, except for people convicted of crimes, becomes so relevant. This isn't an accident.
Right.
It's funny, I'm starting to sound like the people who raised me. But I'm too old for it. I've seen too much. I don't want to go through another 30 years of seeing people wrongly convicted and brutalized and condemned and mistreated, and not do something disruptive, do something different.
What is your hope that people will take away from this museum once they spend time here going through the exhibits?
I think we need to create spaces in this country where we tell the story of what happened to Native people, where we tell the story of what happened to African Americans, where we tell the story of slavery, the story of lynching, the story of segregation. And at the end of it, people are motivated to say, never again. Because I don't think we've ever been required to say that. So my hope is that people will leave this space prepared to say, never again can we tolerate racial bias and bigotry anywhere. And I think if we create a consciousness like that, we can begin to expect more from our institutions, from our schools, from our system, our court system, from our elected leaders than we expect right now. We don't expect as much as we should.
So I want to open it up to you guys. We don't have time to watch this, but I do want to open it up to, let's decompress about this. Let's, get our feelings out. So how are you guys feeling? This has been, and what are you feeling, right? This has been, oh, Cameron, he's like, I've been to both. That's so dope.
I know, I'm jealous.
So jealous, but I'm going to get down there. So maybe not this summer, but maybe next summer. So I'm curious, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? And what do you think so far about what we've learned for the past month? That is so dope that our mom took us. Your mom is awesome. Yes.
I wanted to go this summer. It doesn't look like it's happening.
I know. Okay, Jalen said he wants to share.
Like what Kathleen said, like, has there been nothing said about any of this? Like they just put out a law and then it just went away?
I think Bill Clinton, didn't he apologize or something? I think I'm pretty sure he gave some sort of apology. But there's never been an honest, like, this is what we did, not just to Africans, or not just not just to Africans, because that is who we are, even though we were born here, but our roots come from Africa. So there's never been an apology, or like a real apology. This is what we did to the Africans. This is what we did to indigenous people. And we are sorry, and it was morally wrong, and it was reprehensible, and it was disgusting. And here's what we're going to do to show how sorry we are. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's an apology, you know, that might lead to reparations. And, you know, America's divided on the reparations. And so the last apology, there was one, it says 2008. I'm looking that up. So 2008 would have been
Barack, right?
Yeah. Barack Obama was 12 and 16, right? No, 16 was this one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have been Obama.
No, he was elected in child, I be getting my
I know, I gotta count backwards. Like,
he was elected in 09. I was pregnant when I went knocking on doors. So it was 09, I believe. So was that Bush?
It would have been Bush. It says House resolution. First of all, it's a House resolution.
Okay.
Apologizing for the enslavement and racial segregation of African Americans. And this is in 2008.
Okay. So again, an apology, when you apologize for something, you also like make amends, especially if it's something that you did that was wrong. There has been no making of amends on a countrywide scale. And the thing is, like, there are ways to be able to historically, like, do genealogical mapping to figure out who was alive during this time period, and then who are their descendants. You can figure that out. So that's also an excuse that they say, oh, well, nobody was alive back then, and we wouldn't be able to figure out who's who. That's not true. That's not true at all. The further we get away from things, the harder it's going to become. But that's on purpose. I just, apologies could be made, and it is frustrating. Let's see. Feel like crying. I know. Like when your family member dies, it now goes on to the next generation to handle whatever debts to build up. You're absolutely right. So we're still carrying that debt. We're still carrying that debt. We're still carrying the weight of this thing. We haven't done anything wrong. And that's also what's important to understand. We didn't do anything. And so to have all these horrible things happen, to have our bodies mutilated, there's some things that we didn't even talk about. I mean, the first gynecologists used enslaved Black women to experiment on. They operated on them without medicine. Without medicine. They operated on enslaved Black women without medicine. The first gynecologist, look it up. So the horrors of this is deep and expansive. It's mind-blowing and mind-boggling. The more you read it, if you guys get a chance, get the book, Medical Apartheid. It's a really good book. And then even with indigenous people, their women were raped. They were scalped. If you guys don't know what scalped is, it is literally when you take a knife and you cut off people's scalp. And they did that to men, women, and children throughout this country. There are actually still, you can find pictures of preserved scalps from Native American people. So, yes, when we talk about America, we're talking about a country that is built on the blood, the bodies of Indigenous and Black people. And it is sobering, and it is sad and frustrating. And it's okay to be angry about it too, because a lot of people say, shouldn't be angry. No, it's okay to be angry about these things. The more I learn, I'm still learning. The more I learn, the more angry I become. But I also just tell myself that if my ancestors could endure these things, then who am I to give up? And so I channel that into teaching. And that is why we're here, me and Ms. Williams, because we care about this course so much, and we care about you guys so much, and we feel like this is something that you should know, and that everybody should know, because it makes us better people. And we realize just how far we've come in so many ways. You saw that, Ms. Williams?
No, hold on. I'm sorry, I was gluing. I was listening, but I'm gluing.
Oh yeah, you gotta look at the comment. Supposed to be non-political, so I'm not gonna share that one, but right. So it's like, Jalen, what period are you talking about here? What period? What period are you talking about? Because we just got free. So what period? What period? And we're not even really free still. So what period? People have the audacity to say get over it, and it was a century ago. No, it wasn't. It was 20 years ago with lynching. It was 10 years ago with the looks my family received. It was yesterday with another person called me out for being Black, joking about our history like they experienced it. Yeah. And I think that's also like why I am, just to bring things into a modern time before we go. I've been thinking a lot about like what's been happening to Asian people in this country. And that is why, now there's this story coming around with, what's happening in China to African people. So then, people are saying, well, Black people should boycott Chinese stores and all these things. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't, because what we should be doing is trying to build bridges with people of color. Because one thing that has, especially here in America, the one thing that continues to happen is we continue to be separated when a lot of us are dealing with these same things. And a lot of times, because like what I tend to see it as, people of color, they attack other people of color because it gives them a sense of power that has been denied to them. And so I think that it's important that we talk about these things and that we come together and we unite, because if we continue to separate, if we continue to not support and call out racism and prejudice and discrimination, no matter who it is, then that continues the cycle. So that means it's never going to stop. So we should be calling out when our Asian brothers and sisters are being discriminated against. We also should be calling out China for discriminating against Africans. We got to keep standing up for what's right. And we have to keep, speaking up when we see something that's wrong. And that is how you change things. Because that is why we're in the situation that we're in.
Yep.
So that's right. We're strong and united than apart. And we are doomed to repeat history if we do not learn from it. Absolutely. And we're all human at the end of the day. They are, yeah. Asian people are getting attacked on the street. An Asian person saw me yesterday while shopping and completely turned around and tried to avoid me because they were scared. See? I had a mask and gloves. See, yeah. So
Stevenson, who was on that the documentary you just watched, who had a hand in creating that lynching museum, who also wrote Just Mercy, which is now a movie.
Yes.
Did you know that his brother is a professor at UPenn?
I did not.
Yeah, so his brother, Howard Stevenson, is the Constance Clayton Professor of Urban Education at UPenn. He's a professor of Africana Studies, and he's the director of the Racial Empowerment Collaborative.
Wow, I didn't know that. So you know what? I always think about like why is he just now getting attention for all these things that he's done, Stevenson, and we're you know, Kim K has been doing this work and she gets more attention than he does, and he's done so much in terms of like freeing Black people, you know, freeing wrongfully accused people, many of them Black, and you know, building this museum. You guys should know about this. You know, it should be common knowledge. It's crazy. And we should be calling out China for Hong Kong. Yeah. Well, can't argue with that. People are acting like Black people didn't get shot and killed for wearing masks and gloves, and act all surprised when we don't. This is true, because it's dangerous either way you do. It's like you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't, right? Yeah. So, you know, this is why it's important also to learn about history, because it helps us contextualize the present. And so I'm hoping that you guys are able to do that. I'm hoping that is getting you thinking. I'm hoping we're just giving you guys the tools and the knowledge that you need, and that you're able to make informed decisions and be able to make form your own worldview about certain things. Because I think that's important. You guys are really important time in your lives, and it's important that you're able to begin to start thinking about the world in these ways and in these terms. So I just want to thank all of you guys for rocking with us and for being here, even though it's not mandatory, yet you guys are here. So thank you. And I hope you guys are learning, and I hope it's beneficial. And I hope even if you're not Black, that you're able to like find something that you can connect with within this course, and understand like how important these things are and how connected we all are together, and how we should all be working together to eradicate any form of discrimination or prejudice or racism. Miss Williams, they never try to let us go.
All right, Jalen.
It's 12:04.
I gotta get to my next class.
We gotta go teach our next class, even though we wrote.
I'm packing up my book bag.
Tiffany said I'm still here, even though I'm also in 2 meetings.
Tiffany is a real one.
Gotta love you guys. Amaro said same. You guys make us so happy.
Hi, Amaro.
Right, Miss Williams?
Yes.
He's on yeah. Y'all leave it? Yes. I have to go. You guys realize I have 4 kids, right? I know it's pretty quiet in here during the hour, but that's also because I have an awesome husband that's watching the kids. So I do have kids, y'all. We got kids. Miss Williams got kids too.
Yeah. Mine not up yet. I gotta go wake them up.
So lucky.
You'll get there.
Real quick, we got time. We got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes, Cam. What you say?
What's the debate?
What's the debate, Cam? Real quick.
Bye, Mero.
Bye. Yeah, come on, Cam. What you got? Real quick. Hurry up. This is hot. What?
He said, I feel like I'm being trolled.
Oh no. No, we are not. No, we done already talked about this in class. Bye. I do not want to. No, we're leaving.
Y'all can bring it back. We're gonna talk to y'all later.
Exactly. Oh, Kenneth was here. Oh my God. I just saw him.
Bye, Tiff.
Bye. Bye, guys. We love y'all. Stay safe.
Yes. Bye, Kathleen.
Oh.
Bye.
Bye. Oh. Oh my goodness. All right.